You're on.
Hey, Clint.
Hey Jim, how's it going?
Good. They got me a really fancy speaker over here. I can hear everything instead of on the tinny computer. Wow. This is where we're
We're
going high
upgrading.
tech here.
Got a little bit of an upgrade?
They say so. So I just do it. What's this one down here then, Tom?
That's your mic, so you
Oh,
can hear you.
oh, I got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay. Wow, fancy. Well, like your sponsor logos in the back. It looks similar to ours, eh?
I actually work in a gun store, and so when they get ready to get rid of their banners, I take them home.
Ah, beautiful. Oh, you just
There
disappeared.
we
Oh
go.
no, there you're back again. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. I did want to express something to you. You have
Mhm.
been an exemplar for me growing up and me being a hunter, and I really appreciate all the things that you have done for conservation. And I've been watching your show since I was a child, and I really appreciate everything that you do.
Oh man, I'm gonna get a great big fat head. I won't be able to put my hat on when I hear compliments like that. But it does it means I didn't waste all those decades of trying to get the message out there on how we have to look at wildlife and ethics and the spirituality of the hunting. So it's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, you have been um, a big part as to actually why I started this show, because you have expressed a lot of concerns as far as hunting goes, and the connection that's required in order to appreciate hunting. And I I hope to have as good of a connection as you do with the spiritual side of it as I progress through this. But my experiences tend to be more comical than successful, and so um,
Yeah,
my
that's part
my
of it
show's a
too.
little different.
Yeah.
But anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump right into this? And
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, so I see the book in your background there. Can you tell me anything about that? Yes.
Yeah, we it was a novel. When I was 10 years old, I envisioned this museum we're actually sitting in right now, the Hand-of-Man Museum of Natural History, Cultural Arts, and Conservation. I didn't have a title for it back then, but I envisioned that museum and what would be in it. And also, I decided that with my life, I wanted to be a novelist. I wanted to write a novel. And J.A. Hunter, with his book Hunter, was I mean, I love that book. I read it probably 10 times when I was young, starting when I was 10 years old. It actually is what got me into reading was his book. And I wanted to be a writer, but a novelist. And so I started writing my first novel when I was 10. Same time I started collecting seashells and pretty rocks and insects for our Hand-of-Man Museum. But I realized pretty quick that I could collect those things. They didn't cost anything, and I was capable of doing it. But writing, I didn't even have a story to tell. And after about 8 pages, I used to hide them behind a loose brick in our house. And I realized my manuscript was really sucked. I didn't have a story to tell. So I needed to live life first. And my life was collecting, traveling, collecting, gathering for this Hand-of-Man Museum. And that's how I lived the life that is written in the novel. So 1996, 1993, somewhere in there, I sat down and wrote the first words of Call Me Hunter. Zhivago is dead. I killed him. And I could have continued, but again, even though I was a lot older. I mean, I was in my 40s. I still knew that I had not lived life enough to tell that story, Call Me Hunter, the novel. I just hadn't lived enough. I tip my hat to authors that come out of university and start writing novels. I mean, incredible. They haven't lived anything. How could they possibly have a story to tell? But they do. imagine it. I'm not so imaginative, so I had to live life and then tell the story of that. So Call Me Hunter. I'm not sure where it fits. They had to put a label on it, so they called it a fictional thriller. But it's probably more of an abstract thriller based on reality, autobiography. Sort of a schmozzle of all of that. And I think it. Excuse me. When I stopped international travel in October 2019, Mozambique was my last trip, and I decided that in 2016 because I was that booked out that far in advance. I knew that if I didn't sit down and start writing this novel, I would never get done because it takes time. You can't be traveling around the world and actually focused on writing. I can't anyway. So I sat down November 2019, started writing. COVID hit, they shut us all down for almost 2 years, and in that period, I wrote "Call Me Hunter." Um, the Simon and Schuster in New York City bought it. They get 1,000 manuscripts a week, and they gave me a 2-book deal. So I have to actually write a sequel to it as well, which is good because I couldn't stuff it all into one story or one novel. And they're planning to print 125,000 copies. It's available right now in pre-order from Barnes and Noble, Chapters, Amazon Prime. You can pre-order, but it'll be released on October 17th, this coming October 17th. So it's coming up pretty quick.
Oh, well, that's awesome. It sounds like it'll be coming out right after deer season starts here. So,
Yeah, well, you know what? It's also going to come out in audio. So I suspect there'll be a lot of guys sitting on deer stand listening to it in their ears when they should be listening to the squirrels and the birds and watching for deer. But yeah, it'll be out on audio. I actually, I think it's within the next couple of weeks, I have to sit down in the studio and start reading it. I'm only going to read the second person perspective sections of the book. And then Scott Brick, I mean, he was the one I wanted. They had a bunch of other ideas. I said, no, I want Scott Brick. He did all the Clive Cussler novels. So he's reading the majority of it, and I'm reading the second person perspective. He's reading the third person omniscient perspective.
all right. Well, that's perfect. Sounds like it'll be something I can listen to while I'm in the truck going out to go hunting. So
There you
that'll
go.
be awesome.
Yeah, perfect for long drives.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll be excited for the sequel to come out too.
Yeah, I've got to sit down and start writing that. I've got it in here because, like I say, I lived it. So but it's a matter of sitting down for 6 months and getting the discipline, getting up at 4, writing till noon, going for a hike, then catching up a little bit more writing and going to sleep and getting up at 4 again. I mean, it's a pretty focused life, which, as hunters, we're used to the early mornings and discipline and being able to, put months and years towards a project. That's hunters. We all have the same ability, and we use it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, hunters know exactly that get up at 4 o'clock and have the discipline to do what you need to do to get something done to be successful.
Sure.
So,
I mean, it's way easier to sleep in and then say, the football game's starting at 10. Why bother going out there? And I mean, it's being a hunter. It's an exercise in desire. You have to want it. It has to be part of you. It has to be just like breathing. You can hold your breath for a little while, but you still eventually you're gonna take a breath. And hunting's like that. You can't not do it if you have that inside you. It's just who you are, what you do. It's all one. It's us.
yeah, yeah. And even in the off season, it's still it's not all just out there in the field. There's other aspects to it that a lot of people that from the outside world don't realize that we have to do.
Of course, hunting, the kill is what people focus on. You're a killer. You like murdering little animals. That's like, it's this tiny little bit of a big, well-rounded circle that represents hunting. I mean, hunters, hunting is family, camaraderie, friendship. It's adventure. It's humor. It's culture, like I said, from around the world or wherever it is. Culture. I was in Louisiana noodling, or Mississippi noodling, and Louisiana was catching alligator snapping turtles. I mean, those are different cultures. I don't care, from me coming from up here in Canada, it was awesome. I loved it. We did a big crayfish boil, and I mean, that's hunting. That's hunting. People focus on that little tiny, there goes the arrow, there goes the bullet, and the animal dies. That's not what hunting. It's a tiny little part of it. I think it's Ortega de Gasset, the Spanish philosopher, that says or said, I don't hunt to kill, I kill to have hunted. Because if you're not doing the actual taking part of being one with nature, I mean, we eat meat or we eat stuff, we eat something, we're omnivores. So otherwise you're just a voyeur. And then you go eat a cow that somebody else raised for you and killed for you and butchered up for you and probably cooked for you. So we're part of that. You're not a hunter unless you're actually embracing that part of nature, and with it the responsibility that we all shoulder to look after those animals, to steward the wildlife of this planet.
Exactly. And I can't wait for other people to hear that message that you just said, because that is a big part of hunting. Is everything leading up to and after the kill that's what hunting is.
Of course, that's why when you said it, during the off season, I was going to say, is there actually an off season from hunting? Because it's who you are. It's your life. I'm out there gardening. Yesterday, I was in the garden weeding. It's field to table lifestyle. That's all part of hunting. I mean, hunter gatherers. That's we're embracing that lifestyle. Maybe there's only 10% of us out there that are actually, I guess, privileged enough to be able to live that lifestyle. But there's 80% of the people that are fascinated by it, to varying degrees, depending on what they read in the newspaper last week. And then there's, of course, the 10% that hate us. They probably hated us back in the caveman days too. They were the ones that couldn't. Well, I don't want to say couldn't survive, because somehow they managed to figure out a way to survive just like we managed to. I think they were borrowing our hunted success animals back in the day to survive, and now they've created an alternate world where anybody can survive. So it's just different perspective. That 10% and our 10% will never, the twain shall meet, but the 80% in between, they like the idea of being self-sufficient and reliant and confident, and being able to experience nature, be part of nature, not just look at nature and think they're above nature, but to actually take part in it. And like I say, gardening, that's all. There's no off season. You live this lifestyle. It's truly a lifestyle.
Yes, it really is. And I appreciate that. But while I have you on, you mentioned earlier the Hand to Man Museum. Do you want to tell us anything about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, I envisioned this museum when I was 10 years old. And I mean, we had no money. I grew up my early years in a trailer park. And when mom and dad finally managed to buy a house, the conversation every night was whether dad would get laid off, whether we'd be able to afford the mortgage. I mean, it was a scary thing for a 10-year-old. So it was maybe escapism. I had my National Geographics I could get from the library, and I envisioned that someday I would have a museum, and I would have this and this and this in it, and I would have to go there and there and there and gather this and this and this and meet these people and see these amazing places around the world. So at 10 years of age, I started my museum, collecting for my museum. I didn't know where I'd be able to house it, eventually, or how I'd be able to afford all that. But I started with seashells and insects and pretty rocks and fishing lures. I raided my father's fishing tackle box for any of his old, the older the better. I mean, there was fishing lures from my grandfather in there in this museum. So I started then, and I literally kept on that pathway my entire life. I left home at 17 for university, and basically kept traveling. Up to 306 days a year on average for 20 years, and then 200 days a year before that, just on the road. gathering and bringing things back and shipping things back for this museum. And finally, excuse me, in 2015, our children's school, they decommissioned it back in 2000. And 2015, they finally got it out of the public ownership and into private hands. Well, I bought it, Louise and I. It was a mess. It was a derelict building with squatters and needles, and it was 4 40-foot containers of personal garbage off the main floor. I unloaded out of here. It was just a disaster. Louise broke down in tears, and I said, "It's a white elephant." I said, "Yeah, but I have a vision." And so now in 2019, we opened the doors, and last year we had over 26,000 visitors coming through these doors, and it's by donation. Like I said, I grew up with not a lot of money. I could not have come into a place like this if there was a $1 cover charge. So there'll never be a cover charge in this museum. We're in the process right now of donating the land, the building, the contents, and an endowment to cover expenses for 40 years. Louise and I are doing that. I don't believe you own anything. You're just a steward of it while you're alive. And this needs to stay together for future generations. So our great-grandchildren will be able to come in and see it, and everybody's great-grandchildren, for no charge. No matter how much money they have, they can come in and see this. And it's, you know, the Hand of Man Museum of Natural History, Cultural Arts, and Conservation. So the conservation component is the educational part of it. As I said, it's an old school, and the messaging is the message that we all know: feet on the ground, you know, hands-on wildlife conservation around the world, and that's what we tell the story in this area, in this building. The curations are state of the art because I've traveled to these places and we videoed all these animals and cultural situations that we don't have big write-ups, big, you know, where you got to stand there and read paragraphs and paragraphs. It's actually video. So you plug in a number, and this 2 to 3 minute video will come on telling you about that animal or that thing or that mask or that, you know, whatever you're looking at, dinosaur. I mean, there's Ice Age woolly mammoth skeleton in here. In fact, just today, we're loading in a partial skull of a woolly mammoth with one single tusk, you know, over 20,000 years or whatever anybody believes, whatever their faith is, you know, 6,000 years. The skulls get crushed on the woolly mammoths. And so we found all the pieces, put them all together, and as much as we could, because there's big chunks missing out of it, and then put one tusk back in. So we fabricated all here in-house, you know, all the ironwork, and it'll be put on display today. So we've got woolly mammoth skeletons in here, woolly rhino skeletons, dinosaur, you know, there is dinosaur skeletons as well, but the big one, a Giganotosaurus out of Argentina, is a scientific cast, which is the closest thing you'll ever get. That's what you'll see in any other museum. So, I mean, it's bigger than the T-Rex. It's a pretty fascinating place on the natural history side, but also on the wildlife side. I mean, there's full body mounts all through here, skeletons of narwhals, skeletons of ostriches, hippos, elk. There's moose skeleton in here, plus the full body mounts of the various animals. There's also a world-class library of natural history going back to 1508. The oldest book in the museum is over 500 years old, by Plinius. And then Sir Francis Bacon, 1669. You know, all the exploration books, the original explorers, and Lewis and Clark's first edition, Alexander Mackenzie, first one to go across North America. There's also the natural history, Cobb's and Cuvier, they're all there. So it's a world-class natural history, or the library is world-class about natural history and exploration, and then breaking off into the hunting as well. I've got a J.A. Hunter, as I mentioned earlier, was my favorite book as a youngster. He wrote a book called Hunter, and I have an original first edition that J.A. Hunter actually dedicated to Jack O'Connor. It's from Jack O'Connor's library. So that's in here. So it's it's worth coming to. I mean, I can't. It's hard to describe and how big it is. It's 17,000 square feet, but it's packed full of everything. I mean, you're going to find something in here you're going to be interested in.
Oh, perfect. Well, um, believe it or not, uh, my oldest daughter has been asking me to go to Canada for probably the last 6 months. She doesn't have a reason to go to Canada. She just wants to go to Canada. And so this looks like a trip we'll have to take to go to the museum.
Sure, yeah. We're located on Vancouver Island, so we're on the far west of Canada. Vancouver Island's a 400-mile long island off the coast of British Columbia. The capital city is Victoria, and it is a beautiful place. We can golf all year round here. It's temperate rainforest, so you get a lot of rain in the winter months. But during the summer, April, May, June, July, August, September, even into October, there's hardly a cloud in the sky. Maybe in April and May you'll get a couple 3 or cloudy days and showers, but it's definitely worth coming to see. Bouchard Gardens is here on Vancouver Island as well, and the city of Victoria is awesome. Other than the homeless people that seem to have taken over the West Coast, also Vancouver is a fabulous city to visit. If you like big cities, I mean, it's not my thing, but in terms of big cities, Vancouver is a pretty spectacular big city.
All right. Well, I hate to cut you off, but Zoom is telling me that I have to get off in less than 1 minute. Apparently,
dear.
I've run out of meeting time.
Yeah, no
But
problem at all. Real pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. I have a package headed your way as a thank you. So,
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
yeah,
Awesome.
thank you. Thank you very much. And I look forward to your book coming out.
Yeah, it'll be out October. You can pre-order it now. Just Google "Call Me Hunter" and you'll be able to get it on any of the major, like I say, Amazon Prime, Chapters, Barnes and Noble. They're all selling it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much.
You bet. Have a good day. Keep
You too.
spreading the word.
Will do. Bye.